Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Footy podcast. We're up to episode 31, and today we are doing a round 13 review video. So, as always, we're going to be running through the latest news. We'll review each game. We'll have a look at some of the best players from the weekend, and then we'll have a look at how my tips went. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff, as well as checking me out on socials. So we've got Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them, and yeah, as always, any interaction's always great. So thanks, and let's jump in. Before we jump into the first game of the weekend, let's have a look at what I have coming up this weekend, this week even, video-wise. So this is going live as soon as it's finished recording and uploading, which will be in probably... I had hoped for 8 p.m, but due to the King's birthday game today, it's running a little late, but it should be live probably hopefully about 9:30 p.m. It'll be ready to go Tuesday morning for sure. So that goes live on Spotify, YouTube. We've got a big week on YouTube, so if you're on Spotify listening to this, jump over to the YouTube. Check out all of these mid-season reviews. If you're already on YouTube, make sure you get ready for these because there's plenty coming in this week. As each team has a bye, we run through their season so far. So this week we're going to have Tuesday, we're going to have the Carlton and Essendon ones go live. Wednesday, we're going to have Geelong and Melbourne. And then Thursday, we're going to have West Coast and Gold Coast. Also worth noting that our preview episodes from now on will be going live Friday mornings because there is no more Thursday night football. So Friday mornings every week on Spotify, YouTube, our round preview episodes will go live starting this Friday. Just a day later than they were previously, but that was to beat the Thursday night game. Now we don't have to do that, so we're going to be doing Friday mornings for the regular preview episode. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into the matches from the weekend. And let's start on Thursday night. We had Adelaide hosting Richmond over at the Adelaide Oval. This was... I don't know what to say about this game. Adelaide, their season is in trouble. Richmond, they got a win. Good on them. Well done to them. So the final score was Adelaide 10-11-71, Richmond 12-7-79. So an 8-point victory to Richmond. It looked pretty much like Richmond were going to win most of the day. Adelaide were not great. Richmond kind of led all the way. Adelaide fought home a little bit in the last quarter, but nowhere near enough to get the win. Looking at some of the stats from the game, Adelaide were plus 48 disposals. They had an extra 4 shots, so they did waste their chances. Richmond kicked straighter and made use of their opportunities. Adelaide had a lot of uncontested footy, plus 45 uncontested possessions, but it just didn't help them. Richmond dominated pretty much every other facet of the game. They had 6 extra inside 50s. Their midfield game was huge. They were plus 32 hitouts, they were plus 5 clearances, plus 6 tackles. So Richmond was a great performance. Their last fortnight before this had been really a big improvement on what we'd seen. Obviously the Bulldogs and the Brisbane games were not great for them, but they did follow that up with 2 solid performances, one against Essendon and one against Geelong, where they only lost by like 20 something points and 30 points. So 2 good performances coming into this, but I don't think anyone really expected to see them go out there and beat Adelaide in Adelaide. But they did, so good on them. They got their second win of the year. Adelaide, you'd have to say that's their season done, I would say. Yeah, that's Thursday night footy. We'll run through some players after we've looked at all the matches, just some of the highlighted performances from the weekend. Game number 2 was Friday night. This was the Bulldogs hosting Brisbane at Marvel Stadium, and this got my tipping off to a terrible start, as well as, hopefully, most people, I would imagine. It was... I don't know what's going on. Bulldogs continued their inconsistency. Brisbane kind of continued their inconsistency. As I've been harping on for weeks and weeks, Brisbane's numbers look good. outside of going forward. They just struggle to put a score on the board. They create the chances, they just don't put the scores on. And probably the major factor for them converting this week, was Eric Hipwood. He kicked 6 goals. He played a big game and kicked goals, and that's what they needed. It's probably what they've been lacking all year. Charlie Cameron's been a bit down on form. Joe Danaher has not been certainly up to his high standards. Hipwood has not had a big game up until this one. So that's probably the major turning point for them, this one. Brisbane led pretty much all the way. Bulldogs stayed close-ish in the first half, and then the last minute of the first half, Brisbane kicked 2 goals, including one on the siren, which kind of gave them that gap of about 30-odd points, which, in the end, it stayed that way for the rest of the game. Final score was 10-11-71 for the Bulldogs, funnily enough, exact same losing score that Adelaide kicked. Brisbane kicked 17-12-1-1-4, so they finally had a good high-scoring offensive game. Kept the opposition to a low score, which was a fantastic effort against the Bulldogs, obviously, who are an attacking team. Brisbane dominated pretty much every stat category. They were plus 19 inside 50s, plus 9 shots, plus 18 clearances, plus 15 contested ball, plus 25 uncontested ball. So they just had more of it. They were winning it. They were doing everything right. Brisbane showed why they're still a team that you can't write off this season. They have the talent. They just missed by a goal in the grand final last year. This gets them to 5-6-1, and not unthinkable to see them making the 8. 5.5 wins from 12 games is certainly not what they would have wanted at this point of the season, but a big second half to the year, which is quite possible. Go check out the mid-season review video I did last week for them. I think they've got some winnable games coming up. This win might springboard their season. Who knows whether it will. They might just go back to what they were doing before. But hopefully this is a sign of what Brisbane will show, because Brisbane being good in the league is what we come to expect. They've got a lot of players, and I would be surprised if we don't see that continue on throughout this year. Bulldogs, they dropped to 6-7, and their season all of a sudden, it had turned around. Obviously, about 5-6 weeks ago, there was a lot of question marks about them, but they'd turned it around. They'd started showing some really positive signs. Yeah, they're missing a few players, but this just was not a great performance for them. They'll be wanting to write that one off and get back to it, because that just wasn't up to scratch for them at Marvel Stadium on Friday night. Saturday afternoon, the first game. This was at Utah Stadium in Launceston. Hawthorn GWS. Hawthorn win again. Their season is flying all of a sudden. Their start to the year was very lackluster, didn't show much. It turned around about 6 or so weeks ago. Possibly last time they played in Launceston when they beat St Kilda. Their season's just starting to build. All of a sudden, they're a potential to make finals. GWS reversed. Their season was flying. Now they're struggling. They've been kind of battling for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and it's just continuing at the moment. They really need to find a way to turn their season around, because it's starting to drop off very quickly, and it's not ideal for them. Having a look at some of the numbers from the game, Hawthorn wasted their chances, especially in the first half. They could have been well and truly up in this one. They were 19 points down at half time, but they'd been wasting many, many chances. They ended up winning 12-13-85 to GWS 12-7-79. So Hawthorn were a lot more efficient going forward and converted a lot better in the second half. But that first half, they should have been at least level, but probably could have been a couple goals up, which, I mean, they won the game anyway, so credit to them, but it could have been a lot better for them. 6 goals they kicked in the third quarter really blew the game open from being 19 points down to really get them back in the game. topsy-turvy last quarter. I thought for a second GWS had kicked the goal to win the game with about 4 minutes to go, but went up the other end. Luke Bruce snapped a goal from the boundary line free kick, which got Hawthorn back in front, and they held on to win. Hawthorn were +3 inside 50s, +3 shots, but then GWS dominated some key categories and just somehow didn't use it. Plus, in the middle, they were really great. +9 centre clearances, +24 hitouts, +19 contested football. So GWS in the coalface were really good. They just were unable to convert that into opportunities and good scoring opportunities. So the game certainly didn't go the way they probably would have hoped, in all honesty. Next game up, Saturday afternoon as well. Over in the West, we had West Coast Eagles hosting the 0-11 North Melbourne, who are no longer 0-11, they're 1-11. The Eagles 8-17-65 played North Melbourne 11-8-74. So North Melbourne got their first win of the year. What can you say about it? Great performance from them. I don't think many people expected them to go over and win. Obviously, West Coast aren't a fantastic team. They're rebuilding as well. But it was always going to be a tough game for North Melbourne. Eagles have been playing a lot better in Perth than they have been anywhere else. But they came out. North Melbourne came out and they got the job done. A weird sort of game. West Coast really shot themselves in the foot in this one. Kicking 8 goals 17 is always going to be costly. And they got found out going into the final quarter. North Melbourne were cruising in this one. Looked like they had the game wrapped up basically in a very low scoring game. The first goal of this was only kicked with about a minute to go in the first quarter. But West Coast flew home. They kicked a lot of goals in that last quarter. They only kicked 8 for the match, but off the top of my head, I think they kicked 4 or 5 of them in the last quarter. They hit the front. I thought they were going to do it, and then North Melbourne kicked a couple in that last 3 or 4 minutes just to give them that break of 9 points and win the game. Looking at some of the stats, this was North's best pressure game of the year by quite a considerable margin. It's pretty well known that North Melbourne's pressure game isn't great, full stop, but they've certainly bought it this game, so good on them for that. They were +25 in tackles, they were +47 in disposals, +18 clearances, +15 contested possessions. So they really got in there, got dirty, and fought out this victory. So great performance from them. They certainly gave it their all, which is a great sign. West Coast certainly, as I said, they had their chances. They were +15 inside 50s. They created a lot of shots. They had 25 scores to 19. So no doubt that they could have won this if they had been more effective in the forward half. The turnover game they dominated as well, West Coast. They were +12 in that stat. So that gets West Coast, to 3-10 for the year. Certainly not looking like they're going to be going much higher than maybe 16, maybe 15th at best. North Melbourne, they got their first win of the year. They're now 1-11. They're still going to be last on the ladder. Richmond also got a win this weekend, so they're still a game behind in last, but it's a positive sign in a season where they haven't had many positive signs. So that's definitely a big up for North Melbourne there. They obviously play Collingwood this Sunday, so it'll be interesting to see if they continue that pressure game and maybe put 2 in a row. We then have a look at Saturday night football. This was St Kilda hosting Gold Coast down at Marvel Stadium on Saturday night, and if you didn't watch this game, I'm going to give you the tip right now: do not watch it. It was not an enjoyable time. What happened on Saturday night at Marvel was a bit of a snore fest. I'll say, if you're going to want to watch any of this, maybe just put on the KO mini and watch the highlights, because it was slow. It was very slow. Uncontested football galore. yeah, it's Saints football's low scoring, but this was taken to another level. Final score was 7-9-51 for St Kilda, 7-6-48 for the Gold Coast Suns. Gold Coast still 7-0 in home games. Now they're 0-6 in away games. It's starting to be an issue. I don't want to say it's fully an issue, but it's certainly looking like an issue. They're not going to make finals if they don't start winning at least some away games. You can go 11-0 at home, or 11-0 these days. But if they go 0-11 in away games plus the gather round loss, they're not going to be playing finals. So they need to do something to start winning on the road because it's going to be costly. This was certainly a game that they probably should win on the road. To be honest, St Kilda have not been doing great. Granted, this was 2 wins in a row for St Kilda, but Gold Coast really should have been able to go down there and win this one. In all honesty, having a look at some of the stats, Saints dominated territory, plus 11 inside 50s, plus 10 clearances, plus 21 contested, plus 4 tackles. So they were in and under, getting the ball first and getting the ball forward. And Gold Coast, when they got the ball, just was slow. They chipped it around, they kicked it uncontested, all day long, shown by plus 54 marks. If you have plus 54 marks and you lost the match, then it's a sign that you weren't moving the ball enough and not putting enough pressure on the opposition. That's all I have to say about this game. It was not one that you're going to put in the archives and show your grandkids, let me tell you that much. But St Kilda, they go to 5-8, breathe a little bit of life into their season. They've still got a long way to come back from, but that's sort of coming back. Gold Coast, they're 7-6. As I said, they need a winner on the road at some point. But they're still, as it stands, 7-6. It's not the worst spot to be at going into the bye that they have this week. Hopefully they can reassess their season, have a look at where they're at and what they need to do to start winning some of these games on the road, because that's what they'll need to do if they want to play into September. We had 2 games on Sunday. First up, we had Sydney Geelong at the SCG. Sydney, top of the ladder, 10-1. Geelong had been top of the ladder. They've dropped down to 3rd before this weekend. I think they've dropped down further now after losing to Sydney. But if you had flicked on at quarter time, you would have thought, well, maybe this is the time that Sydney lose. Not for the first time this year has a team jumped Sydney in the first quarter, and even at the SCG, it's happened a couple times. Carlton definitely did. GWS also jumped them in that first quarter, and now Geelong. So at least 3 teams this year have jumped them in that first quarter at the SCG. But like they have the previous couple times, Sydney hit back in tremendous style. The final score was 16-16, 112 for Sydney, 12-10, 82 for Geelong. Just to show this complete contrast in the game map, I guess. First quarter and a half, Geelong was 6 goals for 40 to 0-5-5 Sydney. From that point onwards, Sydney kicked 16 goals to 6. So that's plus 55 they were from that point onwards in the game. Massive turnaround. You kind of expected it from Sydney at some point. They've just been that good this season. You just forget the Richmond game, I guess, and say, well, that one was a nothing. You forget it, because Sydney, other than that blemish, have been outstanding. Their midfield is flying. Their forward line actually had some key goal kickers this week. Amadi kicked 3, which I think is his best return this season. And would be their best return from a key forward, I think. Papley was good, he kicked 4 goals. But yeah, Sydney just kind of changed the game completely. You always felt like they were still in the game when they were 35 points down, but it's probably not the ideal thing to be giving teams 35-point head starts, but they got the points, and that's all that really matters for them at the moment. They're cruising on top of the ladder, and it's very hard to see anybody catching them up the top as it stands. What happens in September will be determined in September. But up until that point, you'd find it very hard for anyone to catch Sydney at current form. Some stats: Sydney plus 60 disposals, plus 7 inside 50s, plus 13 clearances. Key areas: Sydney won in the end. Geelong, they showed signs as they have most of the season, but I just don't know if they're quite there at the moment. They dropped to 8-5. They're still well and truly in the finals hunt, but they need to start winning some more games. Really, they were 7-0, so they've gone 1-5 in the last 6 weeks. Has been some tough games in there, but it's not ideal to be 1-5 in a 6-week period, and that one win was against Richmond. So they certainly need to find a way to turn their form around, because it certainly has dropped. I believe they have the bye this week, though, off the top of my head. So hopefully they use that to good use and come back fresh and loaded after the bye. We then had a Sunday night game due to the long weekend. It was a big game too. Top 4, not quite top 4 teams. Essendon went into the round on second on the ladder. Carlton were 5th on the ladder. Biggest game between these two teams since the last time they played in a final, which was many moons ago. What to say about this match other than one team's going to be very disappointed about the wasted chances and wasted opportunities, and the other team, they'll be stoked that they got away with a win, and that they used their opportunities, I guess. Final score was 9-16-70 for Essendon, losing to Carlton 15-6-96. So a 26-point win, but Essendon had an extra 4 scores than Carlton, so that suggests straight away that Essendon certainly probably had their chances. And when you look into the stats, that's only more emphasised. Plus 35 disposals, plus 19 inside 50s for Essendon, plus 13 in the turnover game for Essendon, plus 19 tackles. So they were outstanding in very crucial areas of this game. They just couldn't put the score on the board. They missed their shots. They also failed to convert a lot of inside 50s into scores. So it was just a tough night for the Bombers. Carlton, they were plus 6 in clearances. They got in there, and it's not their best area of their game. Both teams have kind of struggled in the clearance game over the last month or so, to be fair, but Carlton did pretty well in that area on Sunday night. But looking at the stats, you'd say Essendon won this game, but in the end, the points go to Carlton. Essendon suffer their second loss in a row. So both these teams will be heading into the bye this week. So they'll be recouping, ready to go for a second half of the season. Check out the mid-season bye videos. They both go live on Tuesday. Carlton will go live about 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Time, and Essendon will be live at 7 p.m. I've actually already recorded both of those. So listen out for them tomorrow. They'll be going live on YouTube for a deep dive into both of these teams. Essendon, obviously, they're now 8 wins, 4 losses, and a draw at their bye, which, I mean, at the start of the season, if you had to have offered them that record, I reckon 95%, maybe higher, of Essendon supporters would take it. They've got a good building blocks. They've got plenty of opportunities in the second half to really cement their spot in the finals, and maybe even a home final or a second chance if things really fall into their lap. Carlton, they're 9-4. They're sitting in a great spot on the ladder. They jumped up to second here. Yes, they've played a game extra than some teams, but they've done enough to really set up their second half of the season. They've had a few blemishes. They're not going perfect by any stretch of the imagination. They have a lot of things that they can work on, but they're certainly improving. They're doing okay, and they're 9-4. So if they finish anywhere but the top 4, they will be probably very disappointed with this season. One final game happened on the weekend. It was today, Monday. If you're not listening to this live, then it wasn't today. But it was Collingwood-Melbourne in the King's birthday match. And I won't say it was a ripper because it wasn't, but it was a good game nonetheless. Collingwood, won this one 14-5-89 to Melbourne 6-15-51. Once again, wasted opportunities. Stop kicking poorly in front of goal teams. It's costing every team. There's multiple teams every week that it costs. This week it was Melbourne, it was Essendon, it was West Coast. Was there any others off the top of my head? None that were actually... No others were really bad. But they were the three bad teams at kicking a goal this weekend, and they all lost. They all had chances, especially Essendon, especially West Coast, and kind of Melbourne. Melbourne might not have won if they had kicked straighter, but they certainly would have been a lot more competitive and not lost this by 38 points. A look at some key stats from the game. Collingwood plus 3 inside 50s, plus 10 clearances, plus 20 tackles. Also to note, their disposal efficiency was actually very good for once. It's an area of their game that they really struggle in, so I think that's a positive. A negative for them, they lost the turnover game, which is an area of the game that they tend to be very good at, so not great in that area, but plus 20 tackles for the number one tackling team, so they continue their dominance in that area of the football field with that pressure. Melbourne, plus 23 contested possessions, no surprise. We're calling it tackling all the time that they would get a high contested possession number. And as I alluded to, they won the turnover game by plus 8. So that's a really good performance in that regard from Melbourne, but they just couldn't quite convert it. A couple things from that game. Christian Petrarca, he went to hospital. Hopefully he's all good. Just a rib injury. I say just a rib injury. It looked like it was very painful. So hopefully he bounces back very quickly. Nick Dacos limped off and was subbed out at three-quarter time, but hopefully nothing too serious there. So Collingwood, they jumped to 7 wins, 4 losses, 2 draws. Yes, that's correct, 7, 4 and 2. Back in the 8, so they'll be happy with that. After being 0 and 3, that's a great recovery, I guess. They've got one more game before their bye, which is against North Melbourne on Sunday. If they win that, they go into their bye 8 wins, 4 losses, 2 draws. They'll be pretty happy with that, and a way to, I guess, recover a bit, start getting some players back on the field, and really bounce towards the second half of the season, and potentially still push for a top 4 spot. I don't think they've playing their best football yet, but there's a long way to go in this season. Melbourne, they dropped to 7 and 6, which, I mean, it's not a terrible record, but they're not in the 8. They have their bye this week, I believe. I don't know what to say about them. They've had a really tough 2-week period. They got smashed by Fremantle last week. I think everybody wanted to see them really fight back today, and I know they wasted their opportunities, but at the same time, they didn't look like they were going to be winning this game at any point, really. So they dropped to 7 and 6, and they will be hoping that they come out of the bye ready to go, because their season could get away from them very quickly in the second half of the year. So that's all 8 games. Let's have a look at some of the stat leaders from the weekend. As we mentioned before, Eric Hipwood, leading goal kicker of the week. He kicked 6. Great effort from him. Larkey, he led North Melbourne very well. He kicked 5 goals. I think all 5 of them were in the second and third quarters. I think he kicked 2 in the second and third, 3 in the third. Fantastic effort from him. O'Halloran for GWS and Papley for Sydney kicked 4 each. Many players kicked 3 and 2. Disposal leaders for the round, Sam Flanders, he had 42. A lot of it was uncontested. In a snooze fest on Saturday night against the Saints, Lachie Neale had 38. He was outstanding. 37 for Goulden on the wing was fantastic. And Zach Fisher had 36 for the Kangaroos. Tackle leaders for the weekend, Elliot Yeo had 13. Zach Merritt, he's tackling great. No, he had 11. Will Day, Pete Ling for GWS Rowbottom. And Tristan Zeri had 10 each. Clearances, led by Ruckman this week, really. Christian, it's not Christian at all. Kieran Briggs and Tom De Koning both had 11. Todd Goldstein and Cherry both had 9, with 2 midfielders in the middle. Lockie Neal and Wardlaw had 10 each. Other interesting stats to look at, I guess. I don't know what else. What else do we need to look at? I guess clanger leaders. No surprise who led that. Copped a little bit of a spray this week in the media for his poor kicking. Nick Martin had 9. He gets a lot of it, so that's kind of why he leads that. But not ideal for him this week. 3 GWS players had a lot of clangers, which is a sign of why they lost to Hawthorn. Callaghan, Briggs, and Lockie Whitfield had 8, 7, and 7. Other than that, I don't think there's anything too exciting in the clanger list. What else do we have? Contested possessions this week. Brodie Grundy had a round high 21. Great performance from him. The big ruckman has had a great season, and he's probably not too far from a potential All-Australian berth. I don't think he's there yet, but it's possible, quite possible. Intercept possessions, Liam Jones led the league this week with 12, which is a pretty high number. Not massive number, but good enough. Ground ball gets Callaghan, who turned it over a lot, but he was getting his own football a lot. He was 14. Brett Daniels was 13, as was Sam Walsh. Stoppages, Max Gawn had the most hit-outs with 45 against Collingwood. Centre clearances, Tom De Koning with 6, Goldstein with 5, James Rowbottom with 5. Often overlooked in that Sydney midfield with all the star power that they have, but James Rowbottom is going under the radar this year. I think he's been exceptional. Total clearances, Briggs. We did that, didn't we? Yes, we did. Hit-outs to advantage. This is an interesting one. Brodie Grundy and Nankervis led the way, 13 each. Very, very high hit-out to win percentage, and obviously also high hit-out to advantage for both of them. Fantastic. Bit of ruck work from those players. Intercept marks, Liam Jones was 7, Max Gawn 6, Stephen May 6, so Melbourne really did do well at getting those intercept marks, but a lot of them were deep inside 50, and they didn't make use of them. Marks on the lead, nothing too exciting there. Papley and Waterman 4 each. Interesting to note that Langford only had 2. He's one of the best in the league. For Essendon, he was slightly down. Contested marks, Kaminti and Hipwood, both 4 each. Scoring, we did goals. Goal assists, Sheasel had 4. Fantastic performance from him. He's really relishing his role a bit further forward up in through the midfield over the last month or so. It's great to see him really making use of that. Charlie Curnow, Errol Goulden and Lohman all with 3. Score involvements, Errol Goulden led the week by a mile. He had 15 score involvements, which is a massive effort. Next best were Cripps, Grundy and Pickett with 11 each. The only thing that we haven't looked at is pressure acts. Matt Rowell, once again, he leads it most weeks. There's no plus. Just 36 pressure acts, 8 ahead of the next best, which was Ruben Gidby from West Coast Eagles, as well as George Hewitt and Ryan Mansell and Jack Steele and Tim Taranto, who had his first game back from injury this week. So great efforts from all of them. That's a look at everything. All the good highlighted players from the weekend. There was plenty of good players out there. So yes, we'll have a look now at how my tips went on the weekend, and let me give you the hot tip. It was not great. We led off with Adelaide. They got done at home by the Tigers. Who the hell saw that one coming? But somebody obviously would have. Game 2, the Lions turned up and beat the Doggies, so I got that one wrong as well. We finally got one. Was looking like it was GWS would go in as favourites, but in the end Hawthorn started favourites and they won pretty much by they win by 6, so I was very close with that margin. Got the fourth game wrong. West Coast got done by North Melbourne. I'm happy to get that one wrong. North Melbourne hadn't won a game, so I don't think that was a bad tip. St Kilda got over the line just over Gold Coast. Once again, I was very close with that margin. So a couple of my tips were at least very close in that regard. The actual margin was 3 points in that one. Sydney beat Geelong a little bit more comfortably than I had at 15 points, but they won in nonetheless. Carlton also won slightly bigger margin than that says over Essendon. I then got Melbourne wrong. I tipped them by 4. I did actually tip Collingwood in my main tipping. I changed my mind on that as the weekend progressed and got away with it. But here, I got it wrong. So 4 of 8 for the week. Not fantastic. We've certainly dropped off over the last month. We've had a really rough run. We've dropped from about 68, 69% I think we were a month ago. We dropped down to 63. So we really need to turn it around. It's very hard at the moment, in my opinion. A lot of upsets, a lot of weird results, but we'll keep chugging away at it and we'll see how we go. Just before we wrap up, once again, don't forget to check out all these videos going live on YouTube this week. This one, obviously the review episode, you've already watched it. But coming up, Tuesday we have Carlton and Essendon mid-season reviews. Wednesday we have Geelong and Melbourne mid-season reviews. Thursday we have West Coast and Gold Coast mid-season reviews. And then on Friday, as always, we finish the week with the next episode of the podcast. That'll be episode 32, and that'll be a round 14 preview, looking at all, I don't know how many games are there next weekend, 7, 6, whatever it is, 6, must be 6. All 6 matches from next weekend's football, so don't forget to check them out. Those will be all the times they go live, so make sure you check them out. As always, thanks for tuning in. Not the longest episode, but hopefully it wasn't too much information. Let me know what you thought anyway. How's your team going? Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Check out all my socials, and I'll catch you on the next one.